All right, we are live with this week's Google Hangout. I'm Marty Paget, editor of the Car Connection, and we're here today to talk about what's in your driveway. Luckily, what's in our driveway today is pretty nice. I'll introduce you first to Joel Feder because he's got the subject of one of the cars in our driveway this week. It's the Bentley Continental GT. Joel,
GB.
why? Why do you get a Bentley Continental GT?
I'm special.
You're special. No,
They had a Bentley Continental GT Speed convertible in Portland, and I have never been in a Bentley Continental GT Speed convertible, and I thought it'd be something our fans want to see. So I spent a long weekend with it and experienced the Bentley life.
What did you do with it? Take it out in the country, or?
Took it to Cars and Coffee. All the local, car enthusiasts got to see it. Took some people for some rides. Took my wife and baby in it, so it does baby. And we went for a cruise. Went to get Dairy Queen. Went through wine country. Wife and I went to the coast in Oregon for date night. Just hung out, drove around.
Now, Nelson, you drove the same car. You were on the long lead that went through Tahoe, that went through about a foot of snow halfway through.
Yeah, we started in Vegas, drove up the backside of the Sierras to Tahoe, and then down to San Francisco. But in the Tahoe to San Francisco leg, we were on a highway down the mountain, and as we were on the road, the CHP closed it down because it was so snowy. So there's this train of GT Continentals, convertibles, going down the mountain in snow that had pickups off to the side, stuck in the ditch. It was a drive.
Probably not what they had planned when they first set up that route.
No, but the car did really quite well. I mean, it's a 616 horsepower convertible. You don't really expect that to do so hot in the snow, but the all-wheel drive worked. The tires on it were suitable to the conditions, and as long as you kept the top up, everything was fine.
Well, it has a lot of ground-hugging weight too.
Yeah, but that's kind of your enemy when you're going downhill around corners.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Nobody slid down the side of the mountain. At least there's that. So what's the first thing you think of when you hear or see Bentley Continental? Is that how does that relate to sports cars that could cost that much? I've always wondered this. Why, I know why I would choose a Bentley if I had that kind of cash. But why do you think you might choose it?
Well, I would choose it because if I had that much money, it's not a matter of choosing between cars. It's choosing which cars you want to buy, right? Which of the 19 that will fit in your 20-car garage you would like to own. I just got done driving a $351,000 McLaren 650S, so that's totally in the same category as the GT Speed convertible. Well, maybe even higher. Yeah, right. But I mean, price-wise, it's right up there. It's maybe even more expensive than some, and yeah, it's far less practical. But if I had that kind of money, I wouldn't own one or the other. I'd own both.
Yeah, I think it's funny. We're in this kind of golden age of British super and super luxury cars. I don't think you could have pegged that happening 20 years ago when Jaguar was kind of feeble and Bentley was kind of in between owners.
Yeah, I mean, one half of the equation was there, right? The McLaren F1 and the Jaguar XJ220, but the rest of it was just, nowhere to be found.
Yeah, it was a mess.
Yeah.
So, Joel, why would you pick the Continental? Would you choose the one that you're driving now, or what? I saw some of the features that had been applied to that one. What do you think you would do? And $267,000 is a lot to start off with, but there's some crazy finishes you can do on the convertibles. Stuff that I really love, like the knurled aluminum dash. One of my favorite things of all time.
I have a different take than Nelson. I don't think that, and you're right, at this level, if you have that kind of cash, you are possibly having multiple cars. But, after spending a weekend with it, the two things that came to my head is, because people said, why would you spend $265,000 on a Bentley convertible, and why would you buy this? What does it compete with? And the answers I had to those questions were, after spending time with it, I'm not 100% convinced anymore that you're buying this car and cross-shopping with a ton of cars necessarily, and that this is going up against McLaren 650S, even though it's in a similar price category. It's kind of like a lifestyle. And I was talking to Corey Profit, the Bentley PR rep. you buy a Bentley because it fits into your lifestyle and what you do with your life and the way you live it and the things you do. And that's after living with it for a weekend. It kind of feels like that, honestly. At least that's my take. And it was more practical than I thought. I fit a stroller in the trunk. I fit a car seat in the rear seat. I fit a ton of groceries in the back end with the stroller. I mean, it worked. I mean, we couldn't buy a kiddie pool or something like that with it, but it worked for the weekend. And
you're probably the first person ever to suggest buying a kiddie pool.
We were literally at Target.
Instead of turning it into a kiddie pool, which is what you would do if you actually had the money to buy several cars. Like that.
Literally, we were at Target, and I'm looking at a kiddie pool, and Karen's like, we should buy this. I'm like, honey, we have a Bentley convertible. How are we getting this home? I was like, oh, man.
Honey, but, we have a Bentley convertible. We don't need a kiddie pool.
We don't need a kiddie pool. But so that's, I'm not 100%.
Top of the building.
Yeah, so I'm not 100% convinced that this is being cross-shopped with a ton of cars. Personally, I feel that it's kind of a lifestyle thing. You know, it fits into the way you want to do things. And then also, you know, at the end of the day, it's a really nice car, but I'm not sure I would get this exact model if it was me. I've heard from numerous people the V8S. It obviously is lighter in the front end. It sounds supposedly better, but this sounds really good. And for me, if I was buying it, I'd probably get the coupe, but spending a weekend with this was obviously glorious. It was gorgeous weather. We went cruising with the top down. But in my personal life, I'd probably buy the coupe myself.
I'm going to tell you, actually, I checked into this hotel. I'm in London right now doing a Bentley press event, so I'll take up the second half of the conversation with that. But somebody pulled up, and they were clearly using their Bentley Continental as a family vehicle. And at first I thought it was kind of absurd, but then they unloaded some luggage from the back, and they didn't have a stroller, but they did have smaller kids that would fit pretty easily into it. I don't know, you know, is it a lifestyle or what? I think it's an all-around, it's an everything car. So, you know, when you don't feel like bringing the Range Rover or the GL Class or, you know, whatever else that you're driving SUV-wise, I think inevitably people who have this car also have one of those vehicles. And I don't actually see these guys and women as having supercars necessarily. I think they just want the rich luxury car feel, and they want something that's a little more comfortable on a daily basis when they choose that out of the garage. I'd be curious to see, though, how many of them signed up to buy a LaFerrari or something else like that.
One of the interesting things I've experienced over the weekend, I've had it since Thursday, it's now Monday, at least today, is that, you know, I've had a 911 yellow, so, I mean, stands out bright. I've had a GTR. I mean, I've had cars that stand out. In 4 days, in 4.5 years of getting press cars, I've never gotten so much attention as stoplights, cars and cars. Like, everyone literally pulls up next to you at a stoplight and says, nice car. And I'm just like, oh, me.
Well,
like,
that does it then. Next week you get the Mitsubishi Mirage.
But the point, like, it's not flashy and outlandish. Like, it's not obnoxious. It's very understated in a luxurious way, in my opinion. So that people see it and notice it and still recognize what it is says something to me for how understated it is.
So that's my take, that this is a car that looks as good today as it will look in 30 years or 50 years sitting on the lawn at Pebble Beach. Because these cars
those rear haunches, the rear fenders,
are built to that standard, and whatever GT Speed convertible still exists in original shape in 50 years is going to be on the lawn at Pebble. And we'll be able to say that we drove it when it was new if we're still able to walk or, you know, see or do
30 years. Come on.
anything like that. Yeah. So Continental GT, fantastic. So this week I'm here in London, and I'm here to drive the Flying Spur V8. And I think you remember last year I went to Beijing for about 36 hours. A bunch of us piled over from Detroit, from all around the country, and flew over because the world press launch for the vehicle was held in Beijing. And I'm curious tomorrow to see, number one, how the V8 version is different from the W12s that we drove, but I'm also curious to see if Beijing actually has better traffic and better drivers than London, because from what I've seen so far, it's a pretty close race. You've driven over here before, Nelson, or maybe you didn't. Maybe you were just driving on the Isle of Man.
Oh, well, I've driven in London before, and yeah, it's essentially there are no laws. Everything's just a suggestion. It's every man, person for themselves.
I feel like if you have something on the stature of a Bentley here, you know that that person is. I mean, you would know it anyway that they're so very well connected, but it seems like there's this whole tier of cars that there's very few of them. Like, you have to be very wealthy to just drive a car in London. or you have to be getting through London to get to work, and you have a very inexpensive car. Otherwise, you're on a double-decker bus, or that it's so crazy here to drive, and it's so crazy expensive here to drive.
Well, they have public transportation. They have the what's it called?
Well, there's the tube. There's
Yeah, they have much better
train,
public transportation.
They do, but they've also got taxes to keep people from driving into the middle of the city. It basically, I think you would see more Bentleys than you might see some mid-sized passenger cars because they can afford to get it in. And why would you pay to get in like a Renault Megane? Why would you spend that much money just to have a Renault in the city of London? I don't know. But we are taking off tomorrow morning. We're going to be driving from central London out to Salisbury Plain. And then in the afternoon, apparently the traffic is so bad that we'll be chauffeured for the last portion back into the city because it might end up taking a couple of hours. Yeah, but it won't be that bad, honestly. The last time I was in the Flying Spur, it took about that much time to play with all the controls in the back seat. I mean, $250,000, $300,000 worth of 10-inch tablet screens in the back for each passenger, and our own control over the climate navigation systems because the driver can't be trusted with everything. It's a fantastic car. I'm not sure that everyone is sold on the looks of it, but
I like it.
Yeah,
I really like the look of it.
I mean, I love the way it looks, but the rear quarter is more traditional British car than the front end is. So that. And it's only minor difference with the V8 version, tailpipes and some of the trim differences. Otherwise, it's the four-door version of the Continental still.
I don't know if either of you ever driven one, but I'll be spending the weekend with the Mulsanne next weekend.
Yeah, no, the Mulsanne is pretty fantastic. Now that's the $300,000 car. That's the one that looks very traditional. The
very upright.
The Flying Spur is very much what they consider their sports sedan.
Mm-hmm.
So this version that I'm driving will be the V8. It'll have 500 horsepower versus 616 in the Flying Spur W12. 0 to 60 is only off like a half second from 4.3 seconds. They quote up to about 5 seconds. Top speed is only 183 miles an hour, and I'm sure I can't afford a ticket in this country. Yeah, I mean there are lots of speed cameras around, and even though they're more liberal with it than they used to be, I don't think we're going to come anywhere near that. But the thing I'm curious to see is why would you take the V8 over the W12? It's not. I don't expect it's going to be that big of a price difference, but it's not even that big of a performance difference. I know I've heard from Bentley PR a couple of different things on the coupes, but Nelson, what do you think the difference is between those?
Well, the W12 to me is kind of more modern Bentley in that it's a whole lot more, excuse me, a whole lot more than you need, but it's what you want.
Apparently you're overwhelmed by it.
Right. There's just, the V8 to me seems kind of like, I'm not sure why you would buy it. It does sound really good, and it is likely to be a little bit less expensive, but if you're pitching pennies at the 200,000 plus mark, you're doing it wrong. I'm not really sure what that buyer is, to be honest. I mean,
I think it's it is the price of entry for them to evolve to plug-in hybrid cars. I mean, the 8 cylinders are clearly where they can make a lot of gains on fuel economy, and they have to do it for political reasons. Here in the UK and in Europe, in general, they have to improve the fuel economy of the vehicles that they sell now, so they can have the kind of permission to keep selling W12 cars. And this 8-cylinder architecture is the one that's going to have the plug-in capability. They showed it earlier this year on the auto show circuit, where if you could add 12, 15 miles of electric-only range, you make a meaningful dent in the fuel economy cycle tests, and all of a sudden it's what's it going to somewhere in the 50s mpge maybe. It's going to lessen the burden on other Volkswagen brands to produce even higher fuel economy. I don't know if there's a number you could put to it, but maybe for every plug-in Bentley you sold, you're saving them from having to sell 3 Lupos or 3 Polos.
The W12 I have, literally, and I mean, I would have to tell you, probably 75% of my driving was highway, cruising highway. I averaged like 14, maybe 15 miles per gallon cruising on the highway at less than 2,000 RPM. So, I mean, What the plug-in hybrid? What you're talking about? That'll be a noticeable increase.
Well, unless it could just be a big trade-off of, the weight that you're saving getting the 8-cylinder plus the weight of the battery pack. What's that going to measure out to? They haven't made any specs available yet, so who knows if that's just a trade-off at the same weight point. But 14 miles per gallon combined driving, that's better than a GL 550. I think it's better than a GL 450. Now, there's so many luxury SUVs that get the same numbers. If you can do a couple of miles per gallon better than that, that's a meaningful improvement.
Right. Plus, you have the added bonus with a plug-in hybrid of that brief all-electric range where when you're arriving at the 5-star hotel in Monaco or the golf club or wherever you're at, you're doing it silently.
But why do you want to do this silently? I want to arrive. Like
you want to creep up on people, just scare the heck out of them.
Well, okay, but that's
coming at you.
That's your Diablo buyer. That's your Aventador buyer, right? That's not your Bentley buyer. That's not tea and crumpets. That's Doritos and whiskey.
Oh, there's a Bentley there.
See, I don't even see Bentley as tea and crumpets. I see Orange County. I see you're ultra rich, but you have to make some concession to what your neighbors think. I mean, I bet you every Panamera plug-in hybrid that's going to be sold in the U.S. is going to be sold in Orange County. It's the biggest market for every kind of plug-in hybrid, and the longer Bentley waits to get into that, the more everyone else is going to walk away with the few buyers there must be out there who don't have.
First plug-in Bentley is the upcoming SUV, right?
I can't remember. I think they've announced it's the SUV, but they've shown the plug-in architecture on. It was on the Spur in New York and in Geneva.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be curious to find out what happens with that tomorrow. I'm not looking forward to sitting in London traffic, but then again, I don't have to do it behind the wheel. So hopefully in the morning it'll be a little bit easier. Otherwise, we will file in later this week with the first drive of that car, and we'll have that on Motor Authority, and then we'll have an updated road test on TCC. And Joel, maybe you should even fire away some Instagram stuff before you go and make sure that everybody knows how to follow us on Instagram too.
I will make sure that we are covered in that department.
It's at The Car Connection at Instagram, right?
The Car Connection on Instagram, Car Connection on Twitter, and The Car Connection on Facebook, which
Perfect.
Instagram can filter to all of those.
Perfect. So we'll conclude this hangout. Just to mention that we'll be having a Motor Authority hangout later on this week and one for Green Car Reports as well. So you want to follow those YouTube channels and stay tuned to us. We plan on doing this frequently, and if you have a topic you want to talk about, send it to us, and we'll get to work on it.